Before the show starts, drop a comment below with where you're watching from, then sit back, relax, and get ready for some chilling stories. Douglas wasn't exactly the thrill-seeking type. At 62, he'd traded most of his adrenaline for quiet hikes, photography, and a habit of visiting forgotten places across the American Southwest. Ghost towns fascinated him, not because of what they used to be, but because of how they refused to fully let go of what once happened there. It was in early November when he stumbled across Frost Creek, a town that hadn't shown up on any of his usual maps. Locals in a diner 2 towns over mentioned it in hushed tones, like talking too loud about it might stir something awake. One woman, who looked like she hadn't smiled in years, leaned in close and said, "You're better off skipping that one. Nothing there but ashes and echoes." Naturally, Douglas went the very next morning. The road to Frost Creek was barely a road, more a collection of dirt and loose gravel, winding through dry hills and brittle trees. After 10 miles, the landscape shifted. The air got still. Even with the sun high overhead, something about the place felt dimmer. Houses stood like skeletons, roofs sunken in, windows long shattered. Nature was reclaiming everything, except the school. It stood at the edge of town, a 2-story brick building that hadn't collapsed like the rest. The front doors were chained shut, but someone had already torn a hole through the fencing on the side. Its faded sign, barely legible, read Frost Creek Elementary. Douglas set up his tripod, just across the cracked pavement, narrating into his camera like usual. "Looks like this one held on longer than the rest. Strange that the school's still standing, considering the whole town's a ghost." He stepped inside through the side entrance. The smell hit him first, musty wood, old paper, and something faintly acrid like burnt rubber. The hallways were coated in dust, and every footstep echoed like a shout. Lockers, their paint peeled and warped, lined the walls like metal tombstones. He kept filming, but he was talking less now. The air had a bite to it, even though it was nearly 80 degrees outside. In one of the classrooms, desks were still arranged in neat rows. A child's drawing fluttered on the wall, somehow still pinned after all this time. It was of a fire, bright orange crayon flames, stick figures running away. The figure in the center wasn't running, though. It was standing in the middle of the flames, smiling. That's when he heard the laugh. It was faint, high-pitched, playful, like a kid laughing at a joke you didn't hear. Douglas spun around, but the hallway was empty. He called out, "Hello? Anyone out there?" Nothing. He kept walking. More classrooms, each one eerier than the last. One had scorched marks across the ceiling. Another had all its chairs facing the back wall. The gym was the worst. The basketball hoops were gone, and the floor was warped like something had bubbled up from underneath. He stepped into the center of it and instantly felt the cold. A blast of air rushed past him, enough to ruffle his shirt. Then the doors behind him slammed shut. He rushed over, heart pounding, and forced them back open. But now the hallway outside looked different, like it was longer. The windows along the wall were darker than before, like dusk had fallen in minutes. Douglas checked his watch. 1:17 p.m. Still plenty of daylight left. So why did it feel like twilight had settled over the building? He pressed on, telling himself to stay calm. But the deeper into the school he went, the more things didn't make sense. The stairwells didn't lead where they should. He'd go up and end up on the same floor. A classroom he'd already been in suddenly had its lights flickering. And in one corner of the cafeteria, someone had scrawled across the wall in what looked like charcoal. They never left. Douglas turned off his camera. Not on purpose, his hand just did it. It was the first time in years that he didn't want any record of where he was. He tried to retrace his steps, find the exit, but every hallway just looped. And then, in one hallway with busted lockers and old posters curling off the wall, he saw movement. A small figure at the far end. Still. Watching. It wasn't there when he blinked. But the smell came back, smoke. Stronger now. Like burning cloth. He broke into a run. Douglas didn't remember how he made it to the exit, only that he suddenly found himself outside, bent over, hands on his knees, gasping like he'd just run a mile uphill. The air felt thin, and the sun, somehow, was already low. Hours had passed. But he hadn't been inside that long, had he? He drove back in silence, barely noticing the way his tires kicked up dust on that forgotten road. That night, in a cheap motel 2 towns over, he uploaded the footage to his laptop. At first, it was the usual stuff: empty classrooms, peeling walls, a commentary here and there. But something felt off. There were sounds in the background he didn't remember hearing. Soft knocks. Quick footsteps. A whisper, maybe? He leaned closer. And then, halfway through the video, he saw it. In the reflection of one of the classroom windows, right behind him, was the faint outline of a child. Barefoot. Standing too still. Its face looked wrong, like it had melted on one side. Douglas froze the frame. Zoomed in. It was there. Clear as day. But when he went back to the footage, that frame was suddenly corrupted. Static. Glitch. Gone. The next morning, he tried uploading the video to his blog. It failed. 3 times. He tried emailing a friend the file. It bounced back. His laptop crashed. When it came back on, the folder with the video was gone. Wiped clean. He didn't say a word to anyone. But 2 weeks later, Douglas went back. He told a neighbor he wanted to check something, then hit the road before sunrise. That was the last time anyone saw him. His car was found parked near Frost Creek's outskirts 3 days later, keys still in the ignition, his phone left on the seat. But no sign of Douglas. A search team eventually went in. Cops, volunteers, even a drone or 2. They combed the whole area. Nothing. But one officer, a guy named Keith, I think, he said something strange after. He told his partner, "I heard a bell ring inside the school. Like class was starting. But we didn't go in. We didn't go near it." And ever since then, weird stuff's happened near Frost Creek. Campers hear laughter at night. Hikers lose hours in the woods around it. One guy claimed he saw a little girl in the second-floor window, just staring, not blinking. But the worst? There's a video going around. Blurry, low quality. No one knows who filmed it, but it shows a man walking through an abandoned school. The audio is shot, but you can hear him breathing heavy, panicking, trying to find the way out. Every few seconds, the camera shakes like someone's chasing him, or maybe something. And in the last frame, just before it cuts to black, there's a charred little hand pressed against the lens. Some say it's fake, just internet nonsense. But I've seen the freeze frame, and I swear it's Douglas. Same camera, same shirt, same terrified look in his eyes. He went in to document a ghost town. But something in that school, whatever it was, never let him go. Rebecca hadn't set foot in Claridge, Kentucky in over 17 years. The town hadn't changed much. Same old diner with faded booths, same narrow streets where everyone drove 5 miles under the limit. She was only supposed to be there for a week. Visit her aunt, sort out the last bits of her parents' estate, and get the hell out. But then someone mentioned Mill Creek Middle. They brought it up casually at the pharmacy, like it was just another old building that got shut down. "Yeah, they finally boarded it up for good," the cashier said. "About time. Place has been rotting for years." But there was something in his voice, like he didn't really believe it was just rot. Rebecca had gone to Mill Creek for a year before her family moved. She barely remembered the layout, but the name Emily Harper came rushing back like a slap to the face. 7th grader. Disappeared one afternoon in spring. 1 minute she was in science class, the next gone. No witnesses. No leads. It was the first time Rebecca had ever seen an entire town break down under fear. The really twisted part came a week later, when Miss Geller, the same teacher who'd taken attendance in that class, was found dead in her home. Suicide, they said. But even back then, there were whispers that something was wrong with how it all happened, that the guilt had driven her insane, or that maybe she hadn't done it to herself at all. Now, standing in front of the rusted fence around the school, Rebecca couldn't stop staring. The building looked hollow, like it had been drained of color. One wing was half collapsed, windows shattered, roof sagging. A chain and a keep out sign hung from the main doors, but that didn't mean much in a place like this. She came back the next day with bolt cutters. Inside, it smelled like mold, piss, and something faintly sweet, like fruit left to rot in a sealed box. Her flashlight cut through the thick dark, the beam dancing across dusty posters and broken glass. The hallways were littered with old desks, waterlogged textbooks, and graffiti that looked way too fresh to be years old. In red spray paint across one wall, someone had written, Emily was never alone. Rebecca paused. That wasn't there yesterday. She was sure of it. She'd driven by twice. Her boots echoed across the tile as she moved deeper in. The old science wing was colder than the rest of the school. She shivered and rubbed her arms, even though it was nearly 70 degrees Fahrenheit outside. A few rooms still had furniture, rusted stools, Bunsen burners, broken beakers. One classroom door creaked open slowly as she passed, though she was certain it had been shut. She spent 3 hours inside, filming everything with her phone and a small digital camera she'd brought just for this. Nothing too unusual at first, until she reached Miss Geller's old classroom. The door had C13 scratched into it, but the numbers were backward, like someone had carved them from the inside. The second she stepped in, her flashlight flickered. The chalkboard still had faint writing on it, but it wasn't anything academic. Just a sentence, scrawled in messy cursive. We told her to stop. Rebecca's heart thudded in her chest. She panned the camera slowly, her hands slightly shaking. She wasn't the jumpy type, but the silence in that room felt thick, like it was pressing in on her from all sides. She reached the teacher's desk, now warped and cracked, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a moldy folder. Inside that, a small leather-bound journal. Miss Geller's handwriting. Date entries from 2002. Pages yellowed and brittle. The first few entries were normal, lesson plans, seating charts, complaints about rowdy kids. Then a shift. Notes about Emily. About strange drawings she'd been making. Things she was saying to other students. Emily came to me after class. She said they whisper to me when it's quiet. They say you see better with your eyes closed. I told her to stop scaring the other kids, but she just smiled and said, "You'll understand soon." Rebecca felt a chill crawl up her spine. She turned the page. More entries, all spiraling. Geller wrote about how the lights would flicker only during fourth period. About how she'd find Emily's desk turned around every morning, facing the back wall, even though she always left it facing forward. She's gone, but I still hear her. In the vents. In my dreams. I think she brought something with her. Something that won't let go of this place. Just then, something clattered down the hallway. A locker slamming shut. Rebecca stood up fast, nearly dropping the journal. She wasn't alone. Rebecca held her breath, listening. Nothing. Just silence again, but it felt heavier now, like the building was waiting for her to make a move. She tucked the journal into her backpack and carefully stepped out into the hallway, trying to convince herself it was just the old place settling. As she passed the main stairwell, something caught her eye. A shape, small, quick, darted past at the bottom of the steps. She froze. "Hello," she called out, voice low but steady. No answer. Her phone buzzed. She nearly jumped out of her skin. It was a message from her friend Megan. "Just checking in." Rebecca quickly typed back. "Still at the school. I found something. Going to send it to you tonight. If I don't, you know what to do." She didn't know why she added that last part. Back at home, she scanned every page of the journal and sent it all to Megan, along with the audio and video files she'd recorded. Then she sat in bed for a long time, staring at her ceiling, remembering that line from the chalkboard. We told her to stop. Over the next few days, Rebecca started noticing little things. Her bedroom light flickered randomly. Her apartment smelled faintly of burned plastic. And once, just once, she swore she heard a voice, low and raspy, coming from her closet. She didn't check. She couldn't. But still, she went back to Mill Creek. She left one last voice message for Megan that morning. "I'm going in one more time. There's something else in that place. I think Miss Geller was trying to hide it, or maybe warn someone. I need to see it through." That was the last time anyone heard from Rebecca. 2 days later, her car was found parked outside the school. Police entered the building. No sign of her. No sign of a struggle. Just her recorder still running, placed neatly on Miss Geller's old desk. The last 30 seconds of the tape are nothing but static. Then, faintly, a child's voice says, "She wouldn't stop either." Anthony always said ghosts were just stories we tell to explain weird plumbing. That was kind of his whole brand, busting haunted house myths, debunking shadowy footage, and tearing apart every viral ghost video with grainy red circles and dramatic music. His channel, No Phantom Zone, had over 300K subscribers, and his fans loved how smug he was about it all. So when someone emailed him a tip about St. Mary's Academy, a defunct Catholic school outside Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania, he jumped on it. The school had been shut down in 1997 after enrollment tanked. But locals told stories about the building talking after dark. Some said they heard whispers through the vents. Others claimed the old PA system still crackled to life sometimes, broadcasting voices from nowhere. Maintenance crews refused to go in alone. And once, supposedly, a teen dared to sleep inside overnight and left before dawn, blood on his hands and no memory of what happened. That was the hook Anthony needed. He brought 2 friends with him, Keith, who handled audio gear, and Rachel, who filmed most of their stuff. They got in around 11 p.m., slipping through a busted side door covered in ivy. The place was a wreck, long halls filled with debris, collapsed ceilings, old lockers rusted shut. Their footsteps echoed like gunshots. Right away, Anthony noticed something strange. The building was too quiet. No wind. No creaks. Not even dripping pipes. Just silence. They set up a few cameras in the hallways, then made their way toward the chapel area, supposedly the most active part of the school. The stained glass windows were shattered, casting jagged moonlight across the floor. The air smelled like dust and old incense. That's when they heard it. A whisper. Very faint. Like someone exhaling a word. Keith turned fast. "Did you hear that?" Anthony smirked. "Sound carries weird in buildings like this. Old ducts, old vents, random pressure changes. Textbook." Rachel wasn't laughing. "That wasn't the building, dude. It said something. I swear to God it said my name." Anthony waved it off, but privately he was shaken. He'd heard it too. They pressed on, but things started stacking up. Their lights flickered, first Keith's headlamp, then Anthony's flashlight. The backup mics picked up soft thumping sounds behind the walls. Twice, Rachel stopped cold and asked if someone was breathing behind her. In one of the classrooms, they found writing scratched into a desk. "It knows you're here." Rachel was done. She took her gear and headed for the exit. Keith followed shortly after, saying his batteries were dying faster than usual. That left Anthony alone, standing in the middle of the hallway listening. And the building whispered again. This time it was clearer. 2 words. "Go back." Anthony lifted his camera. "All right," he said, trying to sound cocky. "We're in the final stretch. Everyone else bailed, but I'm still here. Let's prove there's nothing in this school except creaky walls and overactive imaginations." He turned into a narrow corridor that led to the principal's office. Papers were scattered everywhere, some of them singed at the edges like they'd been in a fire. One had a list of names. Anthony froze when he saw his own. Handwritten, in red ink. He blinked. Looked again. It was gone. The air got colder. His breath started fogging. The PA system above him crackled to life, and whispered, "You shouldn't have come." Anthony's heart thudded so loud it almost drowned out the crackling speaker. The whisper had been real. Not just air in the vents. Not imagination. Real. He backed away slowly, camera still rolling, his flashlight trembling in his grip. Then the hallway lights, the ones that shouldn't even have power, flickered on. One by one. A slow, deliberate stutter down the corridor. And with each flicker, the whispers grew louder. Not words anymore, just overlapping murmurs, like a dozen voices trying to talk over each other, all from inside the walls. He stumbled into the principal's office, slammed the door behind him, and flicked the lock. Not that it would help. He pressed his ear against the cold wood silence. Then, directly behind him, he heard his own voice. It came from the corner of the room, from an old intercom speaker on the wall. "I'm still here. Let's prove there's nothing in this school." It was the recording from earlier. Only he hadn't uploaded anything. Hadn't saved it. How the hell was it playing? He ran. Back through the halls, past the warped floors and broken lockers. He didn't stop until he saw the open door they'd come through. Outside, the wind hit him like a punch. It was still night, but it felt like he'd been inside for hours. Back at home, Anthony said nothing. He dumped all his footage onto a drive, shoved it into a drawer, and tried to sleep. But that night, just as he drifted off, a whisper slid across the dark. "Go back." He snapped awake. No one there. Nothing outside. But the next night, same thing. Only now it wasn't just "go back." It said his name. He took a week off from the channel, then two. But the whispering didn't stop. He started sleeping with white noise. It helped a little. A month later, Anthony posted one final video. No intro, no edits. Just him sitting in a dim room, eyes sunken, face pale. I know what I said. I know what I believed, he muttered, barely above a whisper. But there's something in that school. Something that doesn't want to be forgotten. He leaned forward. If you go, don't listen to it. Don't let it talk to you. And whatever you do. The video glitched for a second. Then, over his voice, you could clearly hear a whisper, calm and close. He's lying. Anthony never reacted. Never flinched. He didn't even seem to hear it. But everyone else did.